The rule defines eligibility for voting and committee participation based on attendance count. Attendance is tracked, recorded, and made visible to all members, while representativeness remains unobserved. This converts participation into a measurable signal, shifting attention toward countable presence rather than actual constituency alignment. Once attendance becomes the gateway to voice, members begin optimizing for eligibility rather than contribution. Low-cost attendance events become sufficient to maintain status, allowing minimal effort participation to preserve governance access. Participation shifts from engagement-driven to threshold maintenance behavior. The visible metric suggests that those present are the most active or committed members. But this interpretation relies on the assumption that attendance reflects meaningful involvement. The system begins to equate frequency with legitimacy, reinforcing the signal as a proxy for representation. However, attendance does not encode who is being represented or how decisions reflect broader membership. The metric captures presence, not alignment, creating a gap between signal and underlying constituency structure. This disconnect allows individuals to accumulate influence without expanding representational coverage. Members recognize that maintaining eligibility requires only consistent visibility, not broad accountability. They adapt by attending predictable, low-friction meetings, minimizing cost while preserving access. The incentive compresses participation into repeated, low-effort actions. This creates a selective participation pattern where only those willing to maintain attendance remain eligible. Others, facing higher opportunity costs or irregular availability, gradually lose eligibility despite potential representational value. The participant pool begins to narrow. At first glance, this appears as a natural filtering process, favoring committed members. But commitment here is defined by attendance frequency, not representational breadth or decision quality. The system rewards persistence in presence, not diversity of input. As attendance accumulates, the same subset of members consistently qualifies for governance roles. Decision-making bodies become populated by those optimized for eligibility maintenance. Representation becomes increasingly concentrated. The visible attendance record reinforces the legitimacy of this subset. High attendance is interpreted as qualification, creating a feedback loop between signal and authority. The system begins to validate its own distortion. Members outside this loop face increasing barriers to re-entry. Missing attendance thresholds results in loss of voice, making future participation less impactful. The cost of absence compounds over time. This produces a survivor pool effect, where only continuous participants remain active in governance. The pool no longer reflects the broader membership distribution. It reflects those who adapted to the attendance rule. The system does not explicitly exclude anyone, but the structure of eligibility gradually filters participants based on their ability to maintain presence. Exclusion emerges as a byproduct of the rule. The assumption that open attendance ensures fair representation begins to break down. Access remains formally open, yet practically constrained by accumulated eligibility requirements. The system shifts from open participation to continuity-dependent access. Members inside the eligible group coordinate implicitly through repeated interaction. Familiarity and repeated presence create alignment in expectations and decisions. Governance becomes internally coherent but externally detached. New entrants or irregular participants face a coordination gap. They lack the attendance history required for influence and the continuity needed for integration. Entry becomes structurally disadvantaged. The attendance metric continues to signal fairness and openness, but it masks the underlying concentration of influence within a stable subset. The signal diverges further from actual representational balance. Over time, decision outcomes reflect the preferences of the attendance-optimized group. Broader membership interests become underrepresented in governance processes. System-level decisions begin to drift from original constituency distribution. The equilibrium stabilizes around those who consistently meet attendance thresholds. Voice becomes a function of sustained presence rather than representational legitimacy. Governance aligns with the structure of the incentive, not the diversity of the group. This creates a voice by attendance equilibrium where influence is allocated through visible participation signals. The system maintains internal consistency while operating on a distorted representation base. Behavior converges around maintaining access, not expanding representation. As the same participants repeatedly meet attendance thresholds, their presence becomes predictable. Scheduling and procedural expectations begin to align around this subset, reinforcing their ability to maintain eligibility with minimal adjustment. Attendance optimization becomes easier for insiders, increasing stability of the existing pool. Those outside this pattern face increasing friction when attempting to re-enter. Irregular attendance disrupts their eligibility trajectory, requiring sustained effort to regain voice. The cost of re-entry rises, tightening the boundary around the active governance group. The visible attendance metric continues to validate those inside the system. Each additional record of presence strengthens their perceived legitimacy without updating representational scope. Signal accumulation reinforces authority without expanding alignment. Over repeated cycles, decisions begin to reflect the preferences of those consistently present. Policies and outcomes are shaped by a subset whose participation is driven by eligibility maintenance. System outputs drift further from the broader membership distribution. The system appears stable because attendance remains high within the active group, but this stability is anchored in repeated participation by the same individuals, not in broad engagement. Stability becomes a function of repetition rather than representational coverage. Members adapt further by optimizing not just attendance, but timing and predictability of participation. They align their schedules with governance cycles to minimize effort while preserving eligibility. Participation compresses into efficient, low-variance routines. This compression reduces variability in who participates over time. The same individuals occupy governance roles across cycles, reinforcing continuity of influence. Turnover decreases, locking the system into a narrow participation pattern. As turnover declines, coordination within the group becomes more efficient. Repeated interaction reduces friction in decision-making, allowing faster alignment on outcomes. Efficiency increases inside the group while external representation remains limited. The system begins to favor decisions that preserve this efficiency. Processes that would require broader input or disrupt attendance patterns become less viable. Governance adapts to protect continuity of the existing participation structure. Attendance thresholds remain constant, but their practical effect intensifies over time. Missing even a small number of events can disrupt eligibility, especially for those outside the core group. The threshold functions as a cumulative barrier rather than a simple requirement. This creates a time horizon mismatch between short-term attendance decisions and long-term governance access. Each missed event carries future consequences, compounding exclusion over time. Eligibility becomes path-dependent. Members inside the system respond by minimizing absence risk. They prioritize maintaining attendance streaks over evaluating the marginal value of participation. Behavior shifts toward preserving continuity rather than optimizing contribution. The attendance signal continues to suggest openness and fairness. However, it increasingly reflects persistence under constraint rather than representative engagement. The gap between signal and underlying system structure widens. At scale, this distortion becomes self-reinforcing. The more the system relies on attendance as a proxy for legitimacy, the more behavior converges around maintaining that signal. Alternative forms of participation lose influence. The governance structure stabilizes around a closed loop of eligibility, participation, and decision-making. Those within the loop maintain their position through repeated low-cost actions, while others face escalating barriers. The system locks into a persistent pattern of selective representation. It remains unclear whether this equilibrium reflects intentional design or emergent adaptation. The rules themselves do not enforce exclusion directly, yet the outcome consistently concentrates voice. The mechanism operates without requiring explicit coordination. As this pattern continues, deviations become increasingly unlikely. Any break in attendance threatens immediate loss of voice, discouraging shifts in behavior. The system resists change through accumulated dependency on continuous participation. The final structure is not defined by who is most representative, but by who can sustain presence over time. Governance becomes anchored to the maintenance of eligibility signals rather than alignment with the broader group. The system operates on a stabilized distortion of representation. The system now rewards those who maintain uninterrupted attendance because continuity preserves eligibility and influence. It ignores whether participation reflects broader membership or diverse interests, as long as presence is consistently recorded. Those who miss attendance lose voice regardless of representational value, tightening the link between presence and authority. Before the rule, voice could emerge from varied forms of participation, even if uneven over time. After the rule, only sustained attendance converts into governance access, narrowing the pathway to influence. Behavior shifts from contributing when relevant to appearing when required, reducing flexibility in participation. Members no longer optimize for decision impact or representational alignment. They optimize for maintaining eligibility, since losing it removes access entirely. The system constrains behavior toward continuous presence, regardless of marginal contribution. Governance stabilizes around a subset whose actions align with the attendance requirement. What is rewarded is persistence in visibility, what is ignored is representational breadth, and what is penalized is absence. The equilibrium holds because behavior has adapted to the rule, not because the system reflects the full group.